Trust is one of the most fragile things a heart can lose, and one of the hardest things to rebuild. No one wakes up one morning and decides to stop trusting. It happens slowly, over long nights of unanswered fears, over disappointments that leave quiet scars, over seasons where prayers feel heavy and the world feels unpredictable. She didn't lose trust because she stopped believing. She lost it because life kept giving her reasons to hold her breath instead of hope. People she counted on failed her. Plans she relied on collapsed. Doors she prayed for stayed closed. And somewhere in the middle of all that pain, her heart began to tighten. Not out of rebellion, but out of protection. She still prayed. She still believed. She still whispered, "Lord, help me." But deep inside, a soft doubt had taken root. What if I can't trust again? What if disappointment is waiting for me? What if surrender leads to another wound? Her trust didn't disappear. It buried itself, like a seed beneath heavy soil, alive, but hidden. And in her exhaustion, she mistook that hidden seed for the absence of faith. But God never confuses weakness with unbelief. He sees the trembling heart under the layers of fear. He sees the desire to trust, even when trust feels risky. He sees the child in his arms, longing to rest, but afraid to let go of control. And one day, a quiet, ordinary day, he began calling her heart back to the place it had forgotten. A place where trust isn't forced, but restored. A place where fear loosens its grip. A place where surrender feels safe. A place where she remembers who holds her, who guides her, who has never failed her. If you've ever felt your heart tighten like that, if trust feels fragile, distant, or difficult, if you want to believe again, but your soul is tired, stay. This message is for you. And if these words are already touching a part of you that has been quietly afraid for a long time, consider subscribing. Not for the channel, but so your heart always has a place to return to as it learns to trust again. Now, let's walk through her journey. Her heart didn't stop trusting because it was weak. It stopped trusting because it had been wounded in places too tender for words. Some wounds came from people she loved, people she believed in, people she let close enough to touch the deepest parts of her soul. They broke promises they once made with sincerity. They walked away when she most needed them to stay. They used her vulnerability as a weapon instead of a privilege. They left her with questions she couldn't answer and fears she couldn't silence. Other wounds came from life itself, losses she never expected, doors that closed without explanation, prayers that didn't unfold the way she hoped, moments that made her wonder if her heart was safe anywhere at all. Each disappointment layered over the next, building quiet walls inside her, not because she stopped believing in love, but because she didn't know how to survive another break. And yet, the hardest wounds were the ones she carried silently, the ones no one saw, the ones she hid behind strength, because admitting them felt like weakness, the ones she brushed aside because she didn't want to be too much, the ones she took to bed with her at night, hoping time alone would heal them. But unspoken wounds rarely heal. They linger. They spread. They shape the way a heart learns to see the world. Little by little, her heart began to protect itself, not out of stubbornness, but out of survival. She became cautious, careful, slow to open up, quick to expect disappointment, because disappointment had visited her often. So when she prayed, her words were sincere, but guarded. When she loved, her heart was warm, but afraid. When she hoped, her spirit reached forward, but with hesitation. She didn't realize it, but these wounds had taught her a dangerous lesson: that trust is unsafe, And yet, even as her heart retreated into caution, God saw the unspoken pain within her. He saw every tear she hid, every fear she carried, every moment she whispered, "I don't want to be hurt again." He didn't rush her healing. He didn't shame her slowness. He didn't demand her trust. He simply stayed, close enough to catch every trembling breath, gentle enough to touch places she thought were beyond repair, faithful enough to rebuild what disappointment had shattered. Her wounds did not disqualify her. They prepared her for a trust deeper, steadier, and more real than anything she had known before. Trust does not return through pressure or force. It returns through presence, and that is exactly how the Lord began to rebuild her heart, not in dramatic displays, but in steady, quiet faithfulness. At first, she didn't notice it. The changes were too subtle, like morning light easing into a darkened room, a prayer she whispered half in hope, half in fear. And somehow I found the strength to pray again the next day. A verse that reached her, exactly when her heart felt too heavy to go on. A moment of unexpected peace. In the middle of a day that should have broken her, a reminder that came from nowhere, spoken softly into her spirit. "I am with you. I have always been with you." She didn't trust instantly. Her walls didn't fall in a single moment. But the Lord met her cautiously offered trust, with tenderness. Each small step she took toward him was met with a love that didn't waver. Each tear she hid was seen by the one who collects them. Each fear she carried was answered by a peace that didn't depend on her strength. God didn't rush her healing. He didn't demand a trust she couldn't yet give. He didn't scold her for being afraid. He simply stayed consistent, more consistent than anyone she had ever known. Slowly, her heart began to notice. He was there in the silence. He was there in the questions. He was there in the nights she couldn't sleep. He was there in the mornings she felt weak. He was there in the battles she didn't know how to fight. He was there when she thought she had nothing left to offer. Not once did he step away. And that consistency began to loosen something inside her, the grip of fear, the instinct to self-protect, the belief that she had to survive alone. Trust didn't bloom overnight, but it began to grow, like a fragile sprout breaking through hard soil, small, yet unmistakably alive. She found herself praying with less fear, resting with less tension, breathing with a little more peace, believing tentatively, but sincerely, that maybe, just maybe, she could trust again. Not because life became easier, but because she finally recognized the one who had carried her all along. There came a day, quiet, ordinary, almost unremarkable, when something inside her shifted. She didn't hear a voice from heaven. She didn't have a dramatic revelation. There were no tears, no overwhelming emotions. No sudden moment where everything made sense, but something softened and she recognized it instantly. For the first time in a long time, her heart felt safe. Safe to breathe, safe to hope, safe to believe that her future was not hanging by a thread, safe to trust that the Lord was not going to abandon her midway. It surprised her, because healing rarely announces itself. It grows quietly, like dawn spreading across a tired landscape. She noticed it when she prayed, and didn't feel the need to explain herself. When she worshipped and felt a warmth rise from a place she thought had gone numb. When she read scripture, and the words didn't feel distant, they felt alive again, personal again, spoken directly into her heart. That was the moment she realized trust wasn't something she had to force. It was something God had been nurturing inside her all along. Slowly, her fears began to loosen their grip, not because she became stronger, but because she saw the truth. She had never been unprotected. She had never been unseen. She had never been forgotten. She had never been walking alone. Her heart had been wounded, yes, but it had been held the entire time. This realization didn't erase every fear, but it rewrote her relationship with them. Where fear once controlled her, now faith gently guided her. Where doubt once overshadowed her, now a quiet assurance began to grow. Where she once braced for disappointment, now she leaned, hesitantly at first, but then with growing confidence, into the one whose faithfulness had never once wavered. Her heart had not healed because she tried harder. It healed because she finally rested in the presence of the one who restores what life breaks. And in that rest, trust began to feel natural again. Not forced, not pressured, not fragile. Real, alive, safe. There comes a moment on every healing journey when trust stops feeling like a risk and starts feeling like home. For her, that moment didn't arrive with trumpets or triumph. It came quietly, the way peace always does. She began to trust again. Not because everything in her life made sense, but because she finally understood that she didn't need to carry the weight of every outcome. She didn't need to control the future, to walk confidently into it. She didn't need to understand every delay, to believe something good was being prepared. She didn't need to fear loss, to recognize that the Lord was her foundation. Trust became easier when she realized it wasn't built on circumstances, timing, or certainty. It was built on presence, and that presence had never left her. She found herself whispering prayers. That didn't sound like desperation, but like conversation. She began surrendering things she once gripped with trembling hands. She stopped bracing for disappointment and started expecting grace. Even the way she breathed changed. Her shoulders rested, her heartbeat slowed, her thoughts softened, because the fear that once kept her guarded no longer dominated her spirit. The walls she built for protection were no longer needed, not when she was sheltered under the wings of the one who calls himself faithful. Trust didn't erase her vulnerability. It sanctified it. It made space for her to feel, to hope, to believe again, without fear of collapsing. She began to view her life through a different lens. Not of control, but of surrender. Not of scarcity, but of provision. Not of fear, but of confidence that she was held by someone infinitely stronger than her fears. And as this truth settled deeper into her heart, she understood something profound. Trust is not the absence of uncertainty. It is choosing to lean into love, even when the path is unclear. Her heart didn't just learn to trust again. It learned to rest in trust, to breathe in it, to live from it. And that changed everything. In the end, her healing didn't come from trying harder, from pretending to be strong, or from forcing herself to trust again. Her healing came when she allowed herself to fall into the arms of the one who had been holding her. Long before she knew she needed him, she realized that trust was never meant to be built on perfect circumstances or predictable days. It was meant to be built on the faithfulness of the one who never changes. Trust returned when she understood that every step she walked in fear, he walked beside her. Every tear she cried in silence, he saw. Every doubt she struggled with, he understood. Every moment she felt alone, he was nearer than her own breath. And as her heart leaned into this truth, something beautiful happened. She stopped fearing the future. She stopped replaying the past. She stopped questioning her worth. She stopped doubting his care. She learned slowly, gently, deeply, that trust is not something she builds alone. It is something God builds in her through his consistency, his compassion, and his unrelenting love. Now, when fear whispers, her heart knows where to turn. When doubt rises, she remembers who held her together. When uncertainty tries to shake her, She stands on what she now knows. She is safe. She is guided. She is loved. She is held by the one who has never let her fall. If this message spoke to your heart today, if you felt comfort, clarity, conviction, or simply a gentle return of hope, consider subscribing, not for the channel, but for your own journey, so that every week you have a place where your heart can rest, heal, and learn to trust again, in the presence that never leaves you. Your heart can trust again, and this time, it's not trusting in its own strength, but in the one who makes all things new.